ever heard of the dead hand? Most people haven't. But once you hear this story, you'll never look at nuclear weapons the same way again.
We need immediate altitude.
Let me ask you something. Imagine a nuclear war has just begun. The president is dead. The generals are dead. Every commander who could order a missile launch, gone. So what happens next? Most people would say the war is over. There's nobody left to fight back. Sounds reasonable. But during the Cold War, the Soviet Union looked at that exact situation and saw a terrifying problem. What if your enemy knew that? What if they believed they could wipe out your entire leadership before anyone had time to respond? If they believed that, launching the first strike suddenly became a lot more attractive. The Soviets wanted to make sure that never happened. So instead of building a bigger bomb or a faster missile, they built something far stranger. A backup plan. Not for the army, not for the government, for the launch order itself. The idea was simple. If nobody was left alive to give the order, something else would. That project was officially called Perimeter, but the rest of the world gave it a much more memorable name: Dead Hand. And here's the strange part. The goal wasn't to start a nuclear war. The goal was to make sure nobody ever dared to start one. Because if your enemy believed the missiles would launch, even after everyone was dead, they might decide attacking wasn't worth the risk. Sounds crazy, but that was only the beginning. So why would anyone even build something like this? The answer is simple. Fear.
Base, do you copy?
During the Cold War, neither side trusted the other. Every military exercise looked suspicious. Every missile test raised alarms. Every radar warning felt like it could be the real thing. Nobody wanted a nuclear war, but everyone was terrified that the other side might strike first. Because in nuclear warfare, minutes matter. If your missiles leave first, your enemy might never get the chance to respond. The Soviets kept asking themselves one question. What if Moscow disappeared in a matter of minutes? What if every command bunker was destroyed? Every phone stopped ringing. Every radio went silent. Who would launch the retaliation? If the answer was nobody, then the entire strategy collapsed. Because once your enemy believes you can't strike back, they might start believing they can actually win. And nuclear deterrence only works if nobody believes they can win. So the Soviets needed something more than a promise. They needed proof. Not words. A system. One that could keep working, even if nobody else could. So, how did Dead Hand actually work? Most people imagine one giant red button. That's not how it worked. Most of the time, Dead Hand did absolutely nothing. Humans stayed in control. The system was only activated during an extreme crisis. Once it was activated, it started watching. Radar state, satellites, military communication networks, sensors designed to detect nuclear explosions. But here's the important part. It never trusted just one signal, because machines can be wrong, radar can fail, satellites can make mistakes, false alarms happen. History has proved that. So the system kept checking, again and again. Did the radar detect incoming missiles? Did the satellites confirm launches? Were nuclear explosions detected? Were command centers still responding? Was anyone still giving orders? Imagine sitting inside a bunker, waiting for the phone to ring. It never does. You try another command center. Silence. Another. Nothing. At some point, silence stops being an accident. It becomes information. Dead Hand wasn't trying to decide whether war had started. It was trying to answer a different question. Was there anyone left to stop what came next? If the answer was no, then the system entered its final stage. Here's the part most people get wrong. Dead Hand didn't immediately launch every nuclear missile. Instead, it launched just one. Not a nuclear missile, a command missile. Its only job was to fly across Soviet airspace, broadcasting one final launch order. Missile silos would receive it. Mobile launchers would receive it. Strategic bombers, even submarines. If they could no longer hear Moscow, they could still hear the missile. In other words, even if every command center had already been destroyed, the order could still reach the people who needed it. That's what made Dead Hand so frightening. It wasn't replacing soldiers. It wasn't replacing generals. It was replacing the final command itself. And maybe that was enough. Because if your enemy believed retaliation was guaranteed, destroying your leaders achieved nothing. The safest choice was simply not to attack.
It's strange when you think about it. The system was designed to make nuclear war possible. So nuclear war would never happen. But there was one problem. Machines don't understand doubt. They don't understand instinct. And they don't know when something just feels wrong. Humans do. Then one night, that difference almost changed history. It was September 26th, 1983. Just after midnight. Inside a Soviet early warning bunker, an alarm suddenly went off. The computer reported an American missile launch. A few seconds later, another one, then another. The screen insisted the United States had attacked. If the warning was real, there were only minutes to respond. One officer was on duty that night. His name was Stanislav Petrov. His job was simple: report the attack. But something didn't feel right. He looked at the screen and asked himself one question. If America really wanted to start a nuclear war, why launch only 5 missiles? It didn't make sense. So he made a decision. He ignored the computer and trusted his instincts instead. For several long minutes, nobody knew whether he had just saved the Soviet Union or doomed it. Then the truth arrived. There were no missiles. The satellite had mistaken sunlight reflecting off high clouds for a nuclear launch. A machine had made a mistake. A man hadn't. And maybe that's the most important part of this entire story. Dead Hand wasn't built because machines were smarter than people. It was built because people were afraid they might not be there when the decision mattered most. Officially, very little is known about what happened to Dead Hand after the Cold War. Some experts believe it was retired. Others believe it was upgraded. Some even think parts of it may still exist today. Nobody outside a very small circle knows the truth. And maybe that's exactly how it's supposed to be. Because if your enemies aren't sure whether the system is still waiting, they have to assume it is. Wars usually end when the people fighting them are gone. Dead Hand is built for one terrifying possibility. What if they aren't the ones making the final decision? Maybe that's why, decades after the Cold War ended, nobody can tell you for certain whether the Dead Hand is still waiting.